The Capitol still barricaded. Fences around the Capitol. Apparently, Nancy Pelosi and company were waiting for another insurrection. Not that we had one on January 6th, but she, I guess, had been following social media, following QAnon, if they even exist. And somehow they were told that there's supposed to be another insurrection because March was supposed to be the day that Donald Trump was sworn in as president. You cannot make this stuff up. So as a result, Nancy Pelosi decided to tell the House not to show up for work that day, that they're supposed to stay at home, protected. Now, mind you, the senators came in, went to the Hill, carried on business as usual. But Nancy Pelosi told the House members, don't show up because they're coming after you. This is a big joke. It is propaganda that they're putting out there to you, the voters. They're keeping you away from the people's house. This has to stop. It is very dangerous. They want you to think that there's a group that's out there waiting, lying in wait to take down the government. Now, mind you, when Brett Kavanaugh was supposed to be sworn in as Associate Supreme Court Justice, do any of you not remember the people that went to the Supreme Court were clawing at the doors, threatening the justices? What about that? Oh, we were told that that's democracy at work, and there was nothing to see. Who can forget the spring and summer of 2020? The fires, courthouses in Oregon, Seattle, Wisconsin, police stations burned down to the ground. Who was arrested? Who was charged? Were any of these people in jail? On January 6th, they arrested some people. If you recall, Chewbacca Man, he's still in jail. They want fear in your hearts. They want you to think that they're coming after you, the boogeyman. They're going to first take the house and then go after you. I don't think so. It's a lie, it's propaganda, and don't you believe. Thank you for joining us today. That was my opening. Tonight's guest, we have co-founder of the Tea Party, Michael Johns, and he is going to give us his take on CPAC 2021 and his thoughts on President Trump still being the head of the GOP. First, welcome my co-host at Small Town Andrew. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going great, Rob.
Good. And Michael Johns. Michael, how's it going?
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Good. Glad to have you on the show tonight so that you could break down everything that took place last week at CPAC. But before we get into that, what are you guys' thoughts on my opening about the White House, well, the Capitol under lockdown and the House completely shut down because Nancy was told that there is another insurrection and that they're coming after him?
Yeah, look, there are, having the firsthand experience of witnessing the rise of autocratic governments around the world, a few troubling signs of things that should, and I've been told, should concern anyone in any country. One of the things is this sort of unnecessary fencing or protection of what have historically been incredibly open government buildings. And let me just say, what you nailed it exactly, Rob. The issue isn't just simply that the People's House is fenced off, looks horrible. It's now even drawing protests and opposition from a lot of residents on Capitol Hill who are traditionally, as progressive generally. I mean, it's mostly progressive area as far as residentially government types. And, it doesn't look good. And I think it's clearly got political designs. And so did the FBI director's testimony. I mean, so they're not prepared to release the cause of death for the Capitol Hill police officer who died. Why not? It's now been,
almost a month tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at 2 months since that incident, and the family said that there wasn't a homicide. They thought it was a stroke. And we have information that he had texted his brother, I believe, saying that he was generally doing okay. And then he worsened and he had underlying health conditions. Why would you not at this point? There's got, and then he was, fueling the kind of conspiracy thinking that unfortunately emerges all the time in conditions like this when you don't have government communicating. It fuels a lot of conspiracy thinking, because he was immediately and promptly kind of pulled out of that hospital, and I think his remains were destroyed and
Yeah, we cremated.
Never had any real definitive answer from, no release of the autopsy, which I assume if there was one, no release of any formal cause of death by the medical examiner. I assume he was examined by someone with an ME at that hospital. And now the FBI who's looking at it, who has got, what are they, 60 agents investigating this?
Yep.
How many are working on Obamagate?
Yeah.
How many are supporting?
That's a very good question. Very
Right,
good.
for that ongoing investigation that we were supposed to have seen last Labor Day at the latest. Remember, that was after 3 other previous delays. So quite troubling is the politicization. And this is not new, and it's just sad to say it. The politicization of American justice.
Mm-hmm. Michael,
Right?
whoops. We saw Joe Biden during his inauguration act like he wanted to bring this country together. But when we keep seeing things like these false flags of supposedly MAGA rioters at the Capitol that did not take place today, have you seen any signs of Joe Biden being serious of trying to lower the temperature or try to bring people together?
And wait, and Michael, before you answer that, let me just jump in. Andrew, how dare you say that? You're nothing but a Neanderthal, according to Joe Biden. You are a Neanderthal. We're all Neanderthals, but he's trying to bring us together. Go ahead, Michael. I have to get that in.
Yeah, this guy's got a lot of names for people. I said, one of my themes this past week is he's failing. He's failing, firstly, as a president, he's failing. And second, he's not just failing in one predictable way, he's failing in all ways, like in every way you can imagine. So yeah, he gets out and he makes unity the theme, but unity in their eyes is a euphemism for capitulation. Meaning, agree with us and then we can all be unified. Well, I can say we're unified, but if you don't agree with us, then whatever, we're not talking to you. So I mean, all of these executive orders, 40 plus, Democrats didn't even, congressional Democrats didn't even have input on them. He's not working with the Hill. He's not working with Republicans. He's not communicating with the American people about the things he's done, which are inexplicable in a lot of ways. Some of them we talked about, like this, allowing China now to invest in the electrical grid. I mean, imagine that that's one of your first acts as president of the United States. That means you've been thinking about it for quite a period of time.
Right.
And of course, we continue to have a White House press corps that, I guess they could be, they're starting to get a little assertive in some ways, but you can just tell it's like they're questioning their peers as opposed to the opposition. They're friends. They're all pals. I mean, we all know this. They hang out. They go to happy hour together. It's a social club. Biden. Yeah. Whereas, they used to go to happy hour with those guys in opposition and talk about. They all think they're on the same team, and the American people figured it out. And it's been the biggest blow to their credibility and the ratings, and it's given birth to an entire new alternative media in this country. So he's failing on his promise, which I think we all recognize was not sincere on day one. Then he's failing with the policy substance. The things he's doing are causing concrete harm to the American people. And then he's projecting in his minimal words his unreleased schedule, the refusal now to release the White House Zoom schedule of who they're actually talking to. Their closed offness in a whole bunch of other ways, 40 plus days with no press conference by Biden, an abrupt closing of his White House remarks today, when he said, "What am I supposed to do? Ask, I guess, take questions." And boom, So all the worst concerns are being kind of, reinforced. Is that he's not managing this White House. He's filling the shoes of president and role only, and he's doing what he's being told to do. And the question is, who's telling him what to do? Because I don't think it's Harris. And he's clearly acting robotically. But this is like this is like just, some 50s sci-fi movie of a president who, somehow doesn't campaign for the job, doesn't appear to want the job, has no real appealing agenda for the country, doesn't look like he's up to the job, has lost multiple times before, campaigns horribly against his Democrat colleagues, somehow, I think we know how, ends up where he is. And, and it's basically being told what to do by some form of let's assume it's a hybrid of forces. I mean, what I will say is that which supports this underlying thesis, is that they're operating methodically. So you can't say, well, he's not well, so things are happening. I mean, they operated and executed on those executive orders really with immense speed, and you can tell they're just looking at everything Trump's done for 4 years and checking it off, including personnel, complete everybody out of there. And they've got people lined up for all these jobs, down to really mid and even low level positions that filled with expeditiously. So the work's getting done. It's just not getting done by the president. It's not getting done in coordination with anyone. It's alienating people. I believe this president, in modern times, I think Carter had fallen lowest in Gallup polling in our lifetimes into the 30s. I think this guy's got all the signs of being able to rival that number. I mean, I don't think, like, Obama had a floor, and we knew that in the Tea Party movement, that even when his policies weren't working, when he didn't appear to be communicating that well, when the policies weren't working as he promised they would be, and you could tell people were getting frustrated, you still had like that 40% base that was like lock for him of the country that was with him. And I feel Trump had that too. I think the Make America Great Again base will, certainly promised him 40%. He very rarely, only a handful of times, I think, fell beneath that. And, generally, when you look at the Obama and Trump polling, I mean, their popularity and support levels were pretty consistently similar. It's not ever projected that way in media. You would think that Obama was, people are shocked when you tell them but yeah, more, and there were periods where Trump actually outperformed Obama's popularity at various periods of the 4 years of the first term. So this is a whole different animal, meaning unlike, and I say unlike Trump, unlike Obama, who I think had a base of support even when things went poorly, this guy does not have a base foundation of enthusiasm, isn't communicating in ways that would be able to afford him any messaging when things do go poorly, right? Because there's always a benefit of doing something collaboratively. When it doesn't work, it's half your fault, I guess. Whereas when these things don't work, and they're not going to work, this is going to all be on him. And these Democrats that he thinks are going to have his back are not going to have his back, because they got their own back, and they're not going to want to. They're going to be able to say safely that these weren't their ideas, they weren't consulted on them, and they're not going well. So it might test this cohesiveness that we've all acknowledged with a little bit of admiration exists on the other side, that they've been able to keep their movement and party together. Let's see when this guy starts struggling, which he clearly already is, how much patience they really going to have? And at what point, it's kind of like the relief pitcher, or like in a really bad NFL game when they're calling for the promising rookie backup quarterback. What does this score have to be till you start hearing the rumblings for Kamala?
Well, I think there's rumbling going on right now, but they're trying to keep it low key. I mean, because like you said, who's running things in the White House? I want to play this clip really quick that came. Take a look at it. I mean, and it's really scary.
He sent me 2 letters saying, by the way, can you send me some stimulus money for Wisconsin? We sent millions of dollars. Excuse me. Make sure you have the record plan.
This is a man they say won the election.
Make sure the kids hear words. Now they got a new plan. Trust me, it's not going to cost you any more. Folks, follow your instincts on this one. We know these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by go. You know the thing.
You know the thing.
They put one foot in front of the other. They keep going. That's the unbreakable spirit of the people of America. That's who we are. And Representatives Shirley Jackson Lee, Al Green, Sylvia Garcia, Finelli. Excuse me.
This is scary.
Finell. And what am I doing here?
What am I doing here?
Yeah.
So
That's really cut.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm happy to take questions if that's what I'm supposed to do, Nance, whatever you want me to do.
Now, apparently, Joe wasn't supposed to say, hey, I'll take questions, but I guess he was feeling rather hyped and decided to go ahead and say it. But, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at this man and realize that the Joe that we have now, same Joe who was sworn in.
Look, it's a very difficult predicament because, the other thing is we're not seeing his schedule, which to me suggests there's not much of a schedule, right? Meaning I don't think it's that this agenda is packed with, with a lot of activity. It's not, this guy is not working an 80-hour work week.
No.
Or a 40-hour work week. And, there seems to be, he never seems to do things late in the night or past late afternoon. It's a very sensitive topic too. I'll just tell you from a policy standpoint and a political standpoint. I mean, I hesitate, like in foreign media asked about it, to be too questioning of his capabilities. And I'll be clear, I'm not questioning the competencies or the ability. This administration is functioning and they're on top of things. It's just not in the way it's supposed to be done, because there was the one guy that ostensibly won all these votes, 82 million, right? And he is not the guy running this country to know what he's doing day to day or moment to moment. It's a saddening thing. It's not anything there shouldn't be any joking around about it. It's not funny. A lot of people have parents or grandparents who've gone through this, whatever. But I do think it's kind of like unfair to the American voter, and it's unfair to us even now that we're not being told precisely what's up. Because now he's had several neurological surgeries, as I recall. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Brain aneurysm. But Michael, to your point, to what you're saying that it's not fair. I mean, it's unfortunate, should be taken light or made fun of. But what gets to me is that the cover-up that the media is doing. If the shoes were turned, had this been a Republican, not just Trump, but a Republican, look at how they demonized Reagan. Yeah. And no one is calling for Joe to have.
There's a double standard.
Right. No one is asking for Joe to have a test. He's yet to have a test. We don't know what his doctors are saying his mental capabilities are. He's just wandering around. I mean, he's just there.
Not one press
conference. No press conference. It's been 40 something days and nothing at all. Not only that, but a State of the Union address. We should have had one by now.
By the way, okay, so don't. We're into speculative territory here, but let's assume that he probably doesn't want to give a State of the Union based on the performance I've seen over the last 40 days. It's going to require him to stand on his feet for 2 hours and read competently from a teleprompter before tens of millions of people around the world, with a lot of ramifications to this country on how it's viewed, especially outside of this country, how it's viewed, right? I mean, every country, certainly all of our adversaries and even our allies and those somewhere in between, have books and files on American public officials and the assessment of them. And the higher up you go, particularly at a presidential head of state level, you know, our adversaries have people working on this, right? I mean, you got people in Beijing and Moscow whose job it is to understand what's wrong with this man and to exploit weakness. Sadly, that is the world we're in, where you know, we have adversarial powers that seek to advance, and they spend considerable amounts of time identifying weaknesses, not just in our governmental structure, but in our culture and our nation. They fuel division in our country. They fuel propaganda into our country, conspiracy theories. They very much want to destroy credibility of the American people and our system of government, so that we get to a point where we don't feel we have anything to defend here. Which
Michael, would reporters be wrong? And not reporters, but Republicans, politicians. Would they be wrong to go against him by saying anything that he puts up, for them to say, we don't agree with it because we aren't clear or feel comfortable with his mental capabilities? That if they were to use that nonstop when they're going against all of his policies?
Look, I really understand the mechanisms of the White House press room. One thing I can tell you is that, particularly with an administration like this, that she's calling on reporters knowing what questions are going to be asked, right? And like the other day when they came out on the Khashoggi killing in Saudi Arabia as like the second question, all right, there is no way, as important of an issue as that is in U.S.-Saudi relationships and the geopolitical consequences of it, human rights consequences of it, that would be the question that a White House correspondent would ask at this moment, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of tens of millions of Americans not working, schools not open, even though the science says they should be open. I mean, there's like so many pressing issues. A failure to the politics of him not cooperating with anyone outside of the White House, and all of these issues. There's no way that would be the pressing question. So just like back to Obama, they have a hand-in-glove relationship with the White House press corps that is designed, and they're masters at distraction. It's kind of what's going on. I don't want to diminish the allegations against Cuomo, and just to say that what needs to be said, that those are serious allegations and they need to be investigated. And those women, that's important that be done. Just like it's important that the allegation against Joe Biden himself from his Senate days, I don't know what the status of that is. I haven't looked to see, but I mean, it was turned over to the DC Police Department last I checked before the general election. I haven't seen any definitive report on what actually happened. That woman too, very credible and very detailed as far as what happened. But the main issue in New York State right now is what's going on with the obvious blood on the hands of the governor, and the fact that we talked about it, but it's now validated that this guy made decisions that were demonstrably deadly to the nursing home population, and did so and continued to do so even when it was proven how deadly they were. And I'm not just talking about leaving patients with COVID or putting them into long-term care facilities, but having a state order in place that precluded those facilities from pre-testing new patients being admitted for this highly transmittable and deadly, particularly in vulnerable patients like those in nursing home, virus. And the you know, like as far as how much damage you can do as a governor, it doesn't get much worse than what we just saw from this guy.
Right.
And that today, you know, with the fake tears and all that, no, not buying the authenticity of what we were fed today, the timing of it, the messaging of it, the seriousness of it. I worked on the campaign, you may not know this, against Cuomo in 2010 with Palladino. I was up in New York State, did Tea Party outreach. They attacked me within days, wrongly, of course, with a wrong allegation. Because they're professional liars, a lot of the people manipulating and managing the communications, particularly with that Democratic Party in New York State, were cutthroat. And I knew this guy has got he has a completely contrasting set of qualities. He is, on one hand, one of the most compelling political and alluring political figures out there, period. Forget like what you think of the policies. Like he really is a communicator and he resonates. I mean, I personally found his presentations captivating when he was giving them day to day. I did
feel like it.
They were working.
I personally thought he was rehearsed. And let's just go to the tape and let's just show everyone some of what he has said so far about the entire nursing home fiasco.
Pointing fingers of blame. It's at this, if you think there was a mistake, then go talk to the federal government. It's about pointing fingers of blame. It's that this became a political football. Why COVID? Why did God do this? I don't know. But who cares?
Who cares?
33,
At what point, yeah.
Biden
At this point, what difference does it make? Who cares?
Unbelievable.
You do see some common denominators in the progressive left's messaging when it comes to the unnecessary death of people. I mean,
the audacity of this guy to come out and to say these things, and the way he demonized Janice Dean and said that, you know, that she had an issue and that she should stick to giving the weather when all this
mess with her. I wouldn't underestimate her from what I'm seeing. Don't know. I think I may have seen her in the studio. I don't know if I talked to her, but I would not underestimate that woman's capabilities or dedication to resolving this issue. Women are very effective politically when they become, particularly when they glue in on an issue. They're the best activists. A lot of times they're because they're very action oriented, they're very diligent, and I tell, like, this woman, she is very committed on this issue, and she's going to get accountability on behalf of these relatives. And I know she's going to be successful,
and rightfully so, and she should, but I also think at the same time that what's happening with the sexual harassment that the media is now focusing in on, I think it's a bit of a distraction. So here's one accused Cuomo. This is what she had to say on CBS.
Do you believe he was propositioning you? Yes. For what? What's that?
Unbelievable. Okay, this guy, and he's willing to address this issue and issue an apology with, you know, somewhat fake tears, but says nothing about the nursing home, which in my opinion is more damaging. And they're both bad, you know, what happened. But he's trying to deflect from the nursing home because there's a possibility there could be criminal charges. Whereas with these women, he said, she said. So he probably thinks that, hey, I can get away with this, but I am not going to apologize for the nursing homes. 15,000 people died.
What difference is it? Was that what he said?
I'm sorry?
The exact quote he had there at the end was what, you know, it was like basically like Hillary Clinton on Benghazi. What difference make.
Right. Oh, yeah. Hey, that's good. That's a good point. She said the same thing. What difference does it make?
You see this commonality of themes. These are just regular people out there. You know, these aren't the elite, us, we, the masters of the universe who rule the world, and our posse of friends. These are just normal older people. This is the callousness that the progressive left carries with them as it relates to human life. It's what allows them to justify late-term abortion of preborn life. It's what leads to the callous way they handle healthcare, the political way they handle it, and the way they're handling this too, is that the political ends seem to always be more important to them, more prevailing at the moment than the actual tangible impact on human life, including if it ends someone's human life. Because ultimately, it's a big statement, but you do get the sense that conservatives are very concerned about life. Like they view it different, and you know, largely view it different. We view it as God's gift and children of God, spiritual animals. They feel the country's overpopulated. They feel that the issues of, you know, they think in collective terms, not in the terms of an individual, the impact on an individual. Yeah, you're not seeing the. I think if I were advising him that I don't know at this point why you're in any way defending what clearly was a bad clinical guidance, a bad policy directive, and counterproductive management of it. I think, you know, and I understand we're in a universe politically where I'm sorry doesn't mean anything any longer. You know,
well, it means something when you're being called or labeled a racist, and if you were to come out and say that you're sorry, everyone will really appreciate that. But I think one of the reasons why Cuomo.
What are you talking about? They're never. You're joking, right? I mean, they never excuse that. I mean, that's usually that just expedites your death, because now not only were they right in what they thought, they weren't even sure about the allegation. Now you're apologizing for it. You're validating. It just expedites their final ends. They never slowed it. Do you ever see? Is there ever an example of at least a Republican or a conservative who has made a legitimate error of judgment in some way of any significance, who acknowledges it, apologizes, and is sort of, his apology is accepted? We never, it's like, an apology used to be a significant and meaningful step for someone to take. It's an acknowledgement that you did something incorrectly and should have done it differently. It's an acknowledgement that you learned the lesson from it, and it's an expression of remorse about the methods you did. So you do that, that's a big deal, ostensibly. And the reason he's not apologizing over the long-term care facility decisions is he knows it's not going to have any tangible impact.
And he's arrogant. I think he's arrogant.
And he's discussing the allegations because it's a head fake. I mean, it's you know, that's going to drive New York Post the headline tomorrow, as opposed to these COVID deaths.
Right.
And COVID deaths are imminently threatening to him.
But I think also that Cuomo is an extremely arrogant individual. Like I said, throughout his COVID,
there's no doubt.
Right, his COVID-19 visitations, I never liked him. I felt that he was fake. He was rehearsed, and he was
past tense verbs already.
Yeah, I thought he was telling people what he felt they wanted to hear. It was a contrast between he and Donald Trump. So in my opinion, I just saw through it. I just did not like him.
Well, those numbers are coming down in New York. I mean,
Rightfully so.
On the national level, he's not. Look, let me be honest. In their plan around Kamala Harris, and they see this Newsom recall effort and the Cuomo difficulties as the price they need to pay to clear the way.
Right.
2024 nomination for her.
But
And
Mark,
I mean, that's, I'm going to just tell you, I think I would expect almost certainly that is in political affairs in the White House. That's the thinking right now, is that if that's what they have to take, that's what they have to take.
well, let me ask you this, because we see things like this happening all the time. You would think that such scandals that are taking place now in the Democrat Party, you look at California, you look at Newsom, who's doing a horrible job. You look at Michigan, they're now saying that Whitmer is probably embroiled in something. Cuomo. Then you look at Cuomo, who, without a doubt, of running for president, and now he has the COVID-19 deaths, 15,000 people, the sex scandals. You would think that Republicans would look at this and say, "Hey, this is great for us. Now, if we just lay low and let this stew about, we could take 2022 and 2024." But instead, somehow, they're able to stumble or tumble into their own drama. And it just like wipes away everything that the Democrats are doing to themselves, the damage that they're doing to themselves. How do we become so politically toxic and so naive that this is like a given? This is like a God given to us. Like, okay, let's utilize this. Now we can take back what we deserve. But instead, we will squander this opportunity with inner fightings, not standing up, being true to the party, going back to CPAC. I want to like get that in here. In my opinion, Donald Trump is the leader of the party. Whether or not he should run in 2024,
I can tell you, that was my take. I believe that going into CPAC, I believe that coming out of CPAC, and I think that's a positive thing for us. I think this "Make America Great Again" agenda has saved the Republican Party from some national irrelevance. It was beginning to not be something that working men and women in this country really felt identified with. It addressed most of our deficiencies as a party, and he's changed. And this is a whole new game now. Like our constituency, the people on our side are very different demographically than they were in 08 or 12 or even 16. I mean, now this is an indisputably multiracial coalition of working people, heavy on kind of manufacturing and labor. A lot of this low to middle income country that, in my judgment, has been the worst represented constituency of all. So we like to talk about groups of voters in terms of their gender, their ethnicity, their sexuality, their religion. No, there's the constituencies in this country are the very wealthy, which is a small percentage of the country, but it's a notable one, that do well for a bunch of reasons. And the poor in this country, the desperately poor in this country, where if you are going to be desperately poor, this is the country to be desperately poor in. You will get healthcare, you will get food, you will get housing, right? Section 8, food stamps, Medicaid. We pretty much have survival services covered for them. They don't seem to be very successful in moving people out of poverty, but we do sustain them in it. It's the working man and woman, right, whose parents go into a long-term care facility and they think Medicare is going to pay for it. No, Medicare is not going to pay for 3 weeks of that. Or, who's or who's had gone through job transition issues because of foreign competitive forces and outsourcing of jobs, or H-1B visa programs, or mobilization of the workforce, changes in state demography, divorce, drug addiction, drug or alcohol addiction. A lot of these issues have just hit tens of millions of Americans who could have been okay, would have been okay, if we had a government that had been a little more tuned in at the time to the issues that were first developing, then developed, then were, snowballing, and ultimately became mammoth front page news items and are still ongoing challenges to us. But a lot of people got lost in that constituency and are still out there feeling now disconnected again to their government. That's what, why does Trump have support? Trump put you in the room. Trump put those people in the room for the first time in their lifetime. They felt like when he sat down in the cabinet room, that he was there to represent them and was fighting their battles for them. I think that's largely true. It's more complicated than that always, but basically there's some truth in that this was a working man's president, and now we got another Davos guy in there. Those are the calls. He's taking 3 or 4 calls a day. I don't know why. He's not doing a lot, but he's taking Davos calls. He's not talking to you. He isn't no working man and women. He's this guy. Joe from Scranton. Joe from Scranton hasn't, I think it's been 70 years since he was in Scranton. 75 years. I believe he was in like 4th or 5th grade when he left Scranton. It's been a long time since that guy's been in Scranton.
Mm-hmm. Michael, what did you think?
A little prop that he's played for most of his adult political life.
Michael, what did you think of the substance of President Trump's speech? Did you think he did a good job and hit on all the points that he needed to?
Well, he launched on immigration. I was intrigued to see what would he launch with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he spent almost half an hour on immigration themes when he started. So that was intriguing to me. It certainly seems appropriate. We got tens of thousands of illegals flooding again across this border. The word is out all over Latin America that now's the time. Come on. So we got dealers back in action. We got the illegal smuggling back in action. We got all the sexual abuse stuff back in play, the rape on the way here, the money being paid to these coyotes. They're getting 8, 10, 12 grand for each person that they smuggle in here. Children arriving with no parents. It's the worst, it's the most indefensible policy in the world. And the closer you get, like many issues on our side, the closer you get to it, the more you realize how crazy, literally crazy, and just suicidal it is to this country and to the people even involved in the process.
Who's funding these folks, that are coming at the border with T-shirts on saying, Joe Biden let us in? Why isn't the media saying, wait a minute?
You have attorneys that are down. You have the whole army of attorneys down there. You got all this refugee money, including, frankly, from churches and things like that. Catholic Relief Services is pro-open borders and so happens to be a beneficiary of immense amounts of this resettlement money. You would have to be completely lacking in any cynical qualities to not realize that this has become a business, like just about everything else,
right,
for people that are engaged in it. It's just a question of who wins and who loses. Under Trump's policy, the winner was the American worker, who finally was beginning to see wages come up, and communities who were having less Kate Steinleys, and that. I had a message right before buzzing in with you guys from one of the angel moms. Many of them were, by the way, kicked off of social media too. But that that grouping of people is still hugely important. And I shot her a message back, that you need this issue. We need to personalize it. That's how you got to communicate these things. You cannot speak in broad generalities about topics of life and death. The numbers become lost on people after a while. But when you personalize these issues, like we did with Kate Steinle, like we have with a few other of these cases of victims of illegal alien crime, of fentanyl overdoses, fentanyl manufactured almost 100% in China. Nothing is manufactured in China without the knowledge and involvement of China's Communist Party. So this is a government operation, manufactured, smuggled across the southern border. And so I spoke to a college Republican chapter at USC about an hour ago, and I was saying, boy, can you think of any other issue than fentanyl overdoses that more points to the importance of Trump's messaging and policy agenda on China and immigration? It hits both of them and then also about the victims of this. I mean, many of whom were this very constituency of people, a lot of heavy duty on men who lost labor jobs, and their parents had worked in it, their grandparents had worked in it. They derived a lot of their self-actualization from that work, lost it. And you saw in West Virginia and Kentucky and Indiana, Ohio particularly, which I think was the worst state of all, how heavily this problem hit. And now it's again with home confinement rising again for different reasons, the pandemic. And I think we're just a page away from being back on this same series of sequential events of an administration that's now actively killing off labor jobs in a constituency of people who will be absolutely lost when that happens. And it's like it's a whole series of events, and they lose these jobs, and their marriages break up, and families fall apart, and they fall into depression, and sometimes a lot of times these guys have like legitimate work injuries, from lifting stuff and whatever, and they start on opioids, and it's like the perfect storm, psychologically and physically, and then economically on top of it all.
Now, because Texas is greatly affected by a lot of these aliens coming across the border, I've heard from time to time that within their constitution, they can leave the union. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, they've done. I mean, I think they've really put into place all the most sensible things they can do. But the issue is these are federal amnesty programs ultimately, and we have ports of entry. And the biggest point of entry has been in that El Paso Valley there, which is why it was good that we got some wall structure built there. I want to look a little more closely at what the wall's impact actually is. I mean, we're talking about a 2,700-mile border that we have with Mexico, roughly, I believe. And Trump completed about 800 or 900 miles, I believe. So we concluded that there were parts of that 2,700 miles that were either so dense, like with trees and whatnot, that you really, it wasn't practical for people to cross there. And then but there seemed to me to be still broadly wide open areas. Yeah, and these are horror stories, because these we don't know, and we don't know enough about it because it's happening illegally, and it's the things we do know are the ones that where we're actually intervening and capturing individuals. So one of the things I pointed out, I mean, there's plenty of Pakistanis, Iranians. What are they doing I mean, why would they come across the Mexican border when everyone knows the other way that you get in the United States? No secret is we're one of the few countries in the world where you fly, you land at JFK on a 90-day visa, and you never leave.
Right.
You ever ask any of these guys, as I often have, foreigners, who some of who become citizens ultimately because they ride in the 80s or whatever. It's like, what did you get in a were you in the lottery visa, or like what did you? I just flew here. I knew some people here. I came here.
Yeah.
No one ever asked you to leave, right? No, I did.
This could happen in no other country. And
No,
for some reason, we seem to be okay with it. It's dangerous.
China, man, when the clock strikes that 90 days, like you wouldn't get to day 91 without
Right.
banging on the door. All right. And it would be, they would escort you out of that country. Why is that? Because it really matters, like who comes into your country and stays.
Absolutely.
Because do we have to walk through all the incidents we've been through?
Right.
Boston Marathon, on and on, of individuals inspired by Islamic extremism, individuals inspired by anti-Americanism, individuals inspired by various extremist ideologies, or a sense of nothing to lose.
But that's the thing, Michael. When it comes to those, individuals who come here inspired by, extremist radicals, for some reason, our FBI does not, or chooses or refuses to look at them and call them out for whom they are. They would rather say, look at the domestic terrorist. We're looking at domestic terrorism. These guys are domestic terrorists.
By the way, this is an action item, and I think this is what people want to hear from us. What can they do? Here's one thing: if there's bona fide threat to Capitol Hill, number one, residentially, that place should be notified and cleared out.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
That's first issue, and that's not been done. And I have a theory why, because I don't think there is a bona fide threat. But number two is if they have evidence of what this threat is, they need to articulate it. This is not a game they should be permitted to play. Is that, well, yeah, we know why the officer from January 6th died, but we're not going to tell you. Yes, we know what the threat is, and we're going to secure off the legislative federal body of this country from all foreign visitors and make it look like, Warsaw in the Cold War days. But we're not going to let you know why. There's just some mysterious threat out there.
Right, a boogeyman that we have, a nameless, faceless boogeyman that's looking at. He's going to get us, but we can't tell you who it is. You just got to stay away from the Capitol. We've got to keep up the borders.
If there's chatter, because so far we've seen the arrests, large percentage of Antifa and BLM protest participants who were engaged in violent activities. I don't want to overstate, and I don't think anyone should overstate. It would seem to be a hybrid of people, we talked about the woman killed, Ashley
Babbitt.
I also believe it's a reasonable question. I'm not hearing again. Where's the Republican Party on this? Where's Kevin McCarthy and the team? Who's the officer who shot Ashley Babbitt? Where's the report on the investigation into the justification of the use of lethal force on this unarmed woman? Why was she and she alone shot to death when she was?
And she had served her country.
Well, they didn't know that, but so they had a grouping of people, and they shoot lethally to kill an unarmed woman engaged in admittedly ill-advised and illegal act. Not with any warning either, I don't believe. But again, we don't know because we haven't seen the report. Where's the report? Why? And where are the calls? Well, forget where's the report. We know that. Where's the call for the report?
Exactly. Why isn't the media, why aren't members of Congress asking for the report?
On this issue?
Right.
Well, you have him under oath. The guy's not going to be up there every day to answer these questions. You have the opportunity. Why are we not presenting the question? And then this in the Senate testimony, I guess it was Grassley who asked about what's your information on the cause of death? We're not prepared to release that to just move on. No, you don't move on. These are elected officials that we sent there to ask questions on our behalf of an a bureaucracy, a bureaucrat that no one elected, whose very agency was created by Congress and is responsible to Congress. So the question becomes, on what basis are you doing all of these things? And where are the reports that justify them?
They're on Nancy Pelosi's desk, and she's not going to get them off her desk. She wants us to live in fear, unfortunately. So it's
that was a homicide. Where's the charge of homicide? Because it looks like last I checked, the New York Times retracted the what was it that he hit him with allegedly? That officer was hit with
a fire extinguisher.
Okay,
Sick
so
milk.
So that report turned out to be fake news. That was a great and convenient story for the threat that was presented and for the impeachment process to be able to say these rioters killed a Capitol Hill police officer.
Right.
Well, now maybe not so much. I mean, now it turns out the fire hydrant, the fire extinguisher story has been taken back by the New York Times. We've been forced to retract it. The family has said they go, oh no, he was not. There was no blunt assault or any. That was no factor in his death, and they believe it was a stroke. No release of autopsy, no release of cause of death, no charges of homicides, because you think almost certainly that they would convene a grand jury and have that by now if that had occurred. Which all to me says that, like the other deaths that occurred outside of Ashley Babbitt, and how many were there in total? 7, maybe, I think.
6.
Police and so you had 5 other protesters. It's kind of incredible. A number of people who had situational stress-related fatalities.
Right.
Basically.
Yet one woman was trampled. And I think the day of, I think only one person from the research that I've done was actually killed, and that was due to her being trampled. She obviously failed and people didn't see her, whereas the other deaths took place, I think they were afterwards. But of course, the media doesn't say that. The media said that they were all killed the day of. Now, like you said, the New York Times came and printed a retraction, but when these retractions are printed, there's like only a small little blurb that they'll put in the paper, and then if news talks about them, it's like a quick 5 seconds, and then they move on to something else because they don't see that as being important, and they don't want people to think, wait a minute. You can ask people right now, and they will still say that Brian Sicknick was killed because a blunt trauma to the head, a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, is that, the first story goes out broadly, widely, everyone digests it who's paying attention. And the retraction is, page B8, and
right?
Limited attention. So,
yep.
I myself have to dig into sort of what's going on with the Officer Sidwick thing.
Mm-hmm. So all that being said, Michael,
you see the contrast between the way the family presented it, the way the text message that he sent to his brother also said, hey, I'm doing okay.
See, I was unaware of that. I was unaware of the text message.
He texted his brother when he was on the way back to the Capitol Hill police office, I guess, saying that he was doing all right. And then he wasn't doing all right, and he subsequently was admitted to the hospital, and I think he died the next day. But the point is, and the broader political issue is, if you're looking to lock down the Capitol and present half the country's electorate as a violent threat, which I think we suspect this administration would love to do, it becomes convenient to be able to say that they were engaged in killing Capitol Hill police officer. But it turns out it doesn't look like any law enforcement were killed on January 16. Ashley Babbitt was killed, but we don't even feel any sense of accountability on her behalf as to whether that was or was not. And I'm a friend of law enforcement. I'm not trying to disparage law enforcement here.
Oh, no.
And I knew these Capitol, when I worked there, I knew these guys too. I just tell you, they're not riot police. These, I mean, they're a different category of, they're the how are you doing, drinking coffee in the morning type function. I mean, and they're, I think, appointed. It's kind of another political gift to members of Congress. So they're connected in some way often.
Right. So just
not the people you would have there.
But I have here.
So what you want to call violent insurrection, which I don't believe was an insurrection, but was violent.
Just for the record, I have here. I did a little research, and this is what I came up with, or I was able to unearth. Is that Ashley Babbitt? Of course, we saw how she was killed. She was shot on that day, and that there was another gentleman, Kevin Grissom, who had a heart attack the day of, but he died the next day. Officer Brian Sicknick did not die that day. He was in the hospital for a couple of days. There was a Benjamin Phillips who died of a stroke. A Roseanne Boleyn. She was the one who we can confirm that she was accidentally trampled the day of. So that's just one death the day of. And then there's another Kevin Grissom who died of a heart attack. But of course, the media is reporting that all these individuals died the day of. They died because of an insurrection. And that's just not true. And as we said, whenever there's a retraction, the retraction gets very little attention in the media.
I mean, my position that the whole thing was a bad idea.
Right.
Shouldn't have happened. The people who did it hurt us, didn't help us. Then, if you just leave it there, which is the same thing the leftists would say, you're still allowing them to manipulate. I don't want to see it. As much as it should not have happened, and I condemn the people who did it.
Right.
I also condemn those who are going to manipulate the facts related to it for political purposes. And I do think that the peaceful, incredibly peaceful,
right,
first Tea Party and now MAGA movements,
uh-huh,
who have convened tens of millions of people in thousands of rallies, right, over a decade, and without incident for the most part. Really enjoyable, fun events, family events often.
But Michael, let me ask you this, because this question has come up before in our chat room, and I have had a conversation with a fellow patriot, and she brought this up also. So just, again, what happened on January 6th should not have happened. It was unfortunate. But just when we look at our history, and whenever things have not gone the right way, what do? We protest and we push back. We look at other countries, Venezuela, we look at Iran, we look at Iraq, we look at Libya, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and we tell the individuals there, so it seems, that if you don't like the government, and we've deemed the government corrupt, rise up against the government.
Right.
Speak out. Okay. So the question came to me is that on January 6th, again, I'm not supporting what happened, but on January 6th, you had people who felt disenchanted. Right. They weren't being listened to.
And they weren't being. It's not just they felt that. I mean,
and outside of that, you had 75 million people plus that voted for Donald Trump. They saw what was happening after the election. Clearly, there was malfeasance. Now, I know what the media has said. There wasn't. Stop saying it. But when you have judges interfering with the election, We have judges coming in and changing the rules, and that should have been the job of the state legislatures. Yes, Trump should have had attorneys there looking at this and saying, hey, you can't do that, you can't do this. But still, when you have judges that are going in Pennsylvania and Arizona and Wisconsin and all these places and changing the rule of law for elections when it is not their purview, it is the state legislatures, when you have that happening, and then you have people that are coming out saying, we witnessed this, but then we're told what you witnessed did not happen. What they're telling you you witnessed, the people that are coming up, and they're testifying on a sworn affidavit, pay them no mind, they're obviously lying. 75 million people disenchanted, 75 million people who played by the book, who voted. Now, never mind the illegal votes that came in, never mind the mail-in ballots, because in the ballot harvesting and all that. So you get to January 6th, and you have people who are coming there and they're saying, hey, we're going to support this president. All good intentions. And then there's this underlying theme that the vice president, according to the Constitution, and it has been done before by Democrats, it was done in Bush 2 was made, hey, we want to challenge the certification of the ballots. And if a senator vouches for that, the vice president will say, we're going to send this back to the state. So you have all this happening and all these people thinking, okay, the election might not get overturned, but our voices will be heard.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, and that didn't happen. So the question that came to me is that if we're telling other countries to stand up and to rise up, if you feel as if though your government is corrupt, then what are we telling our own people? And when they do it and we say you were wrong, isn't that like we're double talking ourselves? Now some will say, yeah, but we have the votes for that. We go to the ballot to vote. But we went to the ballots to vote, and look at what happened with various activity.
What would the founders be doing at this moment? I asked myself after we kind of crazily came up with this iconic Tea Party name, and then felt an obligation to be carrying on in the stretch goal of their tradition, what they would do throughout all of these incidents. You know, you think about the fact that the circumstances they confronted back then, conditions they found themselves in, are so wholly different from the situation that exists today. So even on, I corrected some hosts on the Second Amendment again, like I'm sure you guys have historically. Why do you need a AR-15 to kill a deer? And I'm like, I grew up in deer hunting areas. This isn't about killing deer. I could kill a deer with a slingshot. We don't buy guns to hunt. We buy guns to protect ourselves and our property. And that is the second of all of the amendments, the second one listed as being foundational to our constitutional rights as individuals, God-given rights, not government bestowed rights. But then you get into the question of, well, defending, we understand this wasn't ultimately a mechanism of defending against, crime, but they weren't particularly as concerned or focused on that as they were on the empowerment of their citizens to be able to alter the form of government. Our founders refer to that routinely in their writings. It's in it's in Federalist Papers. It's in the Declaration itself. Worth quoting, about the right to throw off such governments, and it kind of does raise the question of what we do next. So here's what I think. So I think the answer, firstly, is who answers this question. I don't believe that you're going to look to elected officials to necessarily answer it. Certainly not this president, who doesn't acknowledge.
Oh, absolutely not.
He's weekend at Bernie's are pushing him around. I think that it's a question that falls to people like us. And I think the answer is that we make a commitment that these 6 states, are going to just simply be followed up on, and that we secure. I mean, this should be not a terribly complicated process. And it is one where people's support for it becomes helpful, because ultimately it's convincing state legislatures. And this is what we heard when we went through the process originally, and we're having some success on the state level, is that, there were many Republican state legislators who weren't particularly pro-Trump, or, weren't invested in it from that standpoint. But when they actually were presented with the details, they were like, oh my God, this stuff is serious. So you go back and you say, like on Georgia, for instance, where you have the agreement between the Democrat Party and the state attorney general, completely circumventing the state legislature illegally, altering the signature requirements. What's the recourse there? Nothing. Mm-hmm. What's the recourse on the voting boxes in Wisconsin? Paid for illegally with private funds, distributed illegally, disproportionately in highly Democrat density areas, collected and counted illegally. Mm-hmm. Where's the citations? Where's the accountability? Where's the change in the popular vote? Where are any of the institutions that have been paid handsomely to make sure this stuff is addressed, which we talked about, I think, last time? Why is the pillow guy, great American, beautiful products, successful story, having to put out a video documenting these things? Well, that's not his thing. It's not even Peter Navarro's thing. This is something that the political folks at the RNC should be doing. And when they're not doing it, we should be questioning the leadership we're getting, because I haven't even heard comments adequately out of that place. And where's media asking Ronna McDaniel what she thinks of Trump's comments about the election being stolen? Does she even agree with it? Because if she agrees with it and has done nothing, I don't like that. And if she doesn't agree with it, I don't like that either. Because the latter would imply that she hasn't reviewed the affidavits.
Michael, what are your thoughts on Ronna McDaniel as head of the RNC?
I was shocked that Trump supported her for that term. I thought we should have had a competitive choice of options. Maybe we wouldn't have found anyone better. Maybe she would have been the best we had. I dispute the statement that she won Michigan for Trump in 2016. And I've been unimpressed with her leadership. No one I know hears from this woman. We have 204,000 precinct chair positions in this country that are vacant because they haven't made an aggressive effort to fill them. They raised $1.4 billion and did a very poor job in election integrity issues. A lot of their candidate selections were, misguided. They continued. I did not see the alignment with the Make America Great Again agenda. Lots of Republican candidates who would have been superbly aligned with Trump who didn't get that kind of support.
Well, here it begs a question.
Same consultants being sent out every 2-year cycle to run these campaigns who lose, and they keep using them.
Well, but so Michael, why is she still there? I have not seen her at all in February. We're now in March. Where is she? Why is she hiding? How do we get rid of her? I mean, she's not doing anything but just pop close to the finish line to, pontificate whatever she's going to pontificate. I mean, I think that's one of the issues. We don't have people who are out there front and center to do the things that they need to do. I look at even in Manhattan.
So you got to do that. You got to demand. I mean, you invite her on her show. She'll say no, but then you demand that you get somebody from the RNC on your show,
right?
And present. No. And and by the way, you might have trouble doing that. But when you have trouble, like at some point, we have to sort of say, look, this is the way I'd encourage everyone to completely rethink the way you look at it. Stop getting angry at this institution like you're not a part of it. We're all a part of it.
Right.
What kind of Republican Party is going to exist in this country? Whatever we define it to be. I probably haven't done enough to formulate a relationship with this woman. I've probably some things that I could be better at in doing it. and her relationship with me, my relationship with her would probably be a very overall nationally constructive one to have. But it does trouble me that they have been quick to rush out and take credit for victories that I know they were not behind when we were, and they don't communicate. And now on this fundamental issue, after raking in $1.4 billion and their fundraising emails and messages popping up with desperation every 5 seconds on people's phones, that they ought to start being a little more, there needs to be a human dimension to this. And we need to hear more out of these guys. I mean, they just seem to dodge everything, and they come to the wrong conclusions. I mean, it started in 2010 with the autopsy of the '08 McCain loss, where Priebus and that gang concluded that they were too tough on border security and it alienated Hispanic voters, when it was the exact opposite. That to me says money is still driving the game, and the swamp, is running stuff. But that's only because we're allowing it to happen.
Right. And I think we work in silos too many times. I mean, we said before on the previous show when you were on with Michael Loftus, how we've got to start supporting each other because our voices are definitely being deplatformed. Why someone from the party would say, well, we're not going to go on that show because of whatever reason. You would think they would say, no, let's get on this show because we never know who we might be able to reach.
The RNC should be pulling all of their advertising from Facebook, all their advertising from Twitter, all their advertising from YouTube. That's not a small amount of money, right?
Yeah.
But we're always known for being the turn the other cheek types, which we are, and then shocked when the next smack comes, But and that's what a lot of us liked about Trump. I think he could have been more forceful. Frankly, this whole issue on the social media censorship should have been resolved in the last 4 years.
Absolutely.
It was an FEC reclassification, and they had FEC council had concluded that they had executive authorization to do it. Instead, there was a social media summit at the White House with a bunch of never Trump conservative types there, or not Trump, whatever you want to call them. And we had no, a lot of threats, but ultimately no action.
Yeah, that should have been resolved. I agree with you 100% wholeheartedly. It should have been resolved the last 4 years. I mean, I look at Josh Hawley. I mean, he was talking about it. And you would think that the Republicans would have jumped on top of this and said, hey, we have got to do something. And nothing. It's like, why call these people up to the Hill to testify? And yeah, you guys are going to burn them like Ted Cruz. They grilled them and whatnot. But they were probably laughing, knowing that, but nothing's going to happen. And we're going to make certain that your voices aren't heard during the election.
Go back and look at the Zuckerberg and other testimony where they sat there, and it was always like, well, I don't know. You give them a concrete example and be like, oh, I have to look into that. Probably. Yeah,
I've got to look into it. It's like,
I think, they go back to Silicon Valley and just sit around and go, like, everything's probably the algorithm, and then just start breaking out laughing, blaming everything on the algorithm. I mean, look.
Well, you look at the article that was published in the New York Times. Not the New York Times, but Time Magazine.
Inside Washington, D.C., there is this dedication to and undue respect sometimes afforded some of these private companies that are big and successful because we're the party of capitalism. But when those companies have achieved their market position with questionable market presence, authority, tactics, and then abuse their power in those roles, they need to be made another utility.
Yep.
Yeah. And by the way, what's stopping? I mean, that's where this is all headed. I mean, it's going to be, you can turn off somebody's Facebook, and we saw in that congressional candidate down in Florida, the Uber and Lyft bender, Laura Loomer. I mean, what happens when you say, well, we're not going to give you a mortgage, or we're not going to allow you to bank here. We already see.
And it's going to happen.
we already see examples of credit card companies that you can't utilize them for gun purchases and things like that. This reminds me of a question that turned into a mighty argument I once had with a laundromat, unnamed, in New Jersey, where I went to pick up some stuff and they had these credit card minimums, which I knew were not permissible under the card agreement. They just arbitrarily made them up, and I know why they do. I mean, it's, they don't want to pay anything on a $15 purchase or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But finally, it's this stuff just has got to get under your skin, because we have these laws for a reason. You know what I mean? And if you're going to reap all the benefits of playing ball in the system of the United States of America, freest country still in the world, even though we're less free, undeniably, it's not like we run a risk. We are a less free country today than even when the three of us first met.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's how fast this regression has occurred. And
Absolutely.
We're on.
Absolutely.
So don't be talking like message-wise, fellow conservatives, about the risk of socialism. Firstly, the risk is bigger than just socialism. This globalism reset is much more nuanced than that.
Right.
They want you working. Don't get me wrong. They want you working. They want you sending your kids in war. They want you paying your taxes, and they want you to shut up because they don't want to hear your viewpoints. And they want you playing by the rules that they come up with. And you can find them on the World Economic Forum in the reset section. China will be running the world. We will be assimilating refugees. These decisions have been made for you. And if this is starting to bother you, they've been made for you because you allowed them to make these decisions.
Right.
All right. They are not elected officials. They are not, in many cases, even Americans.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's scary. They're not America. That's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we are not. The game's not over, and we have to commit ourselves to a sensible nationalism that puts the American people first and foremost. And I haven't changed in my mindset on the free market economy or on free trade. I'm all for those things, but we're justifying things that are not free market. Just because a private company is involved doesn't make it free market. Just because it's trade doesn't mean it's free trade. All right. When China's tariffs on our auto exports are 25% or something, and ours are 2% on theirs, and we weren't even charging them for decades. I don't know if you know that, on this 2% tariff. We just didn't have to think about it. As part of our undue and ongoing generosity that we've got nothing back from for them. That's not free trade. Come on. Who's saying with a straight face we have free trade with China?
Right.
Michael,
trade.
One more question I wanted to ask before we wrap up here. After President Trump's speech at CPAC and all that we're seeing with Joe Biden, are you feeling confident so far going into 2022 that we're going to either win the House or Senate back?
Well, you can only kind of comment on how I feel today, because this soap opera continues to play out. But you got to say that Biden predictably is failing. His policies are going to fail, and he's not going to resonate with people. Democrats are going to try to separate probably at some point, but they're going to have difficulty. They're passing a lot of this stuff, and they're not openly questioning or pushing back on it. And it's very difficult to see this going in a positive direction. I mean, on what policy basis would you possibly say that these ongoing closures of schools and whole economies, what appears to be a mismanaged distribution of the vaccine system? I mean, for all the criticism that Trump unduly received in his I think fairly decent management of this pandemic, they are mismanaging this. And we're not doing anything but the China issue, who, by the way, is now not releasing any of the final phase trials on their vaccines. So they're shipping them all over the world, all over the place. We have no public data at all on the efficacy of this stuff. In 2018, they manipulated data results to justify vaccines. They've historically put out vaccines that have been deficient in mandatory vaccination cases. And the biggest story of this whole thing is that the sickening reality is that the very companies that have benefited have been these big technology companies in this pandemic. And the small community companies have been the ones that have been most decimated. They don't have the lines of credit. They don't have the financial stability. They don't have other geographic locations they can draw on. They don't have global presence. And how many of these small restaurants and bars that have been around for, multiple lifetimes, may never open again. And in comes, Ruby Tuesdays and Pizza Hut or whatever. I mean, you sort of see, and the Walmart and Amazon, which have been huge beneficiaries, have to pay their fair share of the forgotten man and woman's plight. They just do. I mean, they've been given, they lobbied and got separate. I mean, we talked about the standards. Their stores were open, the same store down the street, because it wasn't a global chain, was not. Their lobbyists were better, and the small companies had no presence or standing with governmental officials and got no consideration. So this has been bad all the way around. And still, where's the China accountability? And now the World Health Organization, which will not put the blame on the Wuhan lab, also will not release any information documenting the basis for any of these conclusions. Are you kidding me? We should finally just, I hope people understand. I can't believe that we're back in this organization.
Yeah.
And we're going to rely on them for public health guidance. On what basis are we doing that? January 16th last year, they told us that China said there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission on COVID. There were people falling down on the streets all over the place, and not just in Wuhan either, throughout China. Everyone in China, forget the CCP. I mean, everybody in China knew that this thing had human-to-human transmission. And look at the doctors, the doctor who, died trying to tell that story, who allegedly was mistreated in the hospital. Look at the whistleblowers in China whose whereabouts we still don't know about. I can't even ponder what's going on to them right now. Who tried desperately to send out video and other warnings to all of us about the threat of COVID and what was going on, and warn us about it. Those people disappeared, never were heard from again, and no one in position of high authority in this country has been doing much to demand accountability on their whereabouts.
Yeah, well said, Michael. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. Please follow Michael on Twitter @MichaelJohns. You can catch his speech from USC today. I believe you posted it on Twitter or on social media. Great appearance from Michael, and a brilliant guy. He's just an encyclopedia of knowledge. We appreciate him coming on as always. Thank you so much, Mike.
Keep the faith, everyone. We got to be in this. We got to be united as we see ourselves through this. The threat is very real, and
Absolutely.
Violence will only get us deeper into the problem we're already in. That's not an answer, but we do need diligence, and we do need to hold our government officials accountable. That's what our founders, I think, would guide us to today.
Right.
Good seeing you guys.
Yes,
Yep,
thank you for
absolutely.
joining us. Please join us on Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, when our guest will be author Barbara from Harlem and poet Judith R. Robinson. Promise to be a great show. So join us Sunday again at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, God bless, be safe. And as Michael said, keep the faith. This is our party. And, we can make a win for 2022 and 2024. Thank you all, and have a great night.